Violet wasn't the first to cross the finish line. A few guys had already made it, showing off their muscles, and Alice too. But she wasn't last either. The race was over, and the results were clear winners and quitters. And among the quitters, Violet spotted Lily Fairchild. "Shoot," Violet muttered under her breath when she saw Lily scanning the crowd, her face crumpled with disappointment, tears welling up in her eyes. When their eyes met, a wave of guilt slammed into Violet's chest. She'd been too busy helping Hazel Sterling to even notice Lily struggling. Alice must have seen the look on Violet's face and guessed what she was thinking. "It's not your fault," she said. "You can't save everyone, Violet." Then, trying to lighten the mood, she added, "Hey, at least you've proven you're not made of stone." "And whose fault is that?" Violet snapped, then turned and walked away. She couldn't stand being around Alice or looking at Lily's heartbroken face. It was illogical because it wasn't her problem. It was a race. Everyone was on their own. But she'd helped Hazel Sterling, the roommate she totally disliked, and basically left Lily, the nicer one, hanging. Okay, abandoned was a bit dramatic, but still. This was exactly why Violet preferred being alone. It wasn't because she was a loner. She knew that wasn't true. The real reason was that she cared too much. And in a cutthroat world like this, caring too much just meant getting betrayed. Stabbed in the back for your kindness. Violet took a deep breath, pushing down the swirling emotions. This was all Alice's fault. Her words, her very presence, were making her feel things she didn't want to feel. But she wasn't going to let Alice mess with her head. By the time Violet opened her eyes, the knot of anxiety in her stomach had loosened, and she was back in control. While trying to compose herself, Violet had drifted to the back of the crowd, where she suddenly noticed Griffin Hale. Wait a second, Griffin Hale? Violet wasn't sure she'd ever seen the guy smile. And he definitely wasn't smiling now. Waves of anger radiated off him, practically buzzing in the air, making her skin tingle. It brought back the memory of yesterday, when he'd almost choked her. Was it only yesterday? It felt like a week ago. So much had happened. Violet froze as Griffin got closer. She braced herself, expecting him to grab her throat again, maybe finish the job this time. But he just walked past, his shoulder brushing hers. That brief touch felt like a jolt of electricity, sending a wave of heat through her body. She caught a whiff of his scent, a mix of warm woods and amber with a hint of citrus and spice. He smelled like pure strength and energy. Instinctively, Violet turned to follow him, curious about who had ticked him off this time. The other trainees seemed to sense his fury too, parting like the Red Sea. His pace quickened, his eyes locked on his target, ready to unleash his rage. Violet slipped through the gap in the crowd before it closed, trailing Griffin towards the front. She arrived just in time to see him lock eyes with his victim. Oh, crap. Asher Nightshade was in the middle of a conversation with his friend and fellow Alpha, Alpha Roman. When Roman suddenly stopped, his eyes drawn to the angry figure storming towards them. As if sensing the trouble brewing, Asher turned just in time to be met with a furious roar from Griffin. The sound was wild and menacing, echoing through the air and sending chills down Violet's spine. Almost instantly, Griffin's fist slammed into Asher, sending him flying backward with surprising force. But Griffin didn't stop there. He was on Asher in a flash, grabbing his shirt and yanking him upright with savage intensity. Then he started throwing punches, blow after brutal blow. Each hit landed so hard that Violet's stomach churned. It was terrifying. Griffin looked like he was trying to kill Asher. "Asher!" Violet screamed without thinking, stepping forward. She barely moved before someone grabbed her from behind. She spun around, furious, and found herself face to face with Dion. "Let me go! That is going to kill him!" Violet yelled, struggling against his grip. "Are you crazy?" Dion snapped back, holding her tight. "Nobody gets in the middle of a fight between two alphas. You want to get yourself killed? But he's going to kill him," Violet snarled, her dislike for Griffin boiling over. It wasn't like she was Asher's biggest fan, but he was the only one at the school who'd been even remotely helpful. Whatever his reasons, at least he wanted her around. She needed him as an ally, not dead. "No, he won't. This isn't the first time two alphas have gone at it," Dion said sharply, his voice intense. "Just in case you haven't noticed, fighting is what wolves do. They fight to survive, Fight to prove themselves. Fight for what they want. Fight to be on top. His words were like a slap in the face, but they also calmed her down a little. Her anxiety eased as she looked back at the fight. Asher was finally landing some punches of his own, but Griffin was still clearly winning. As if to prove Dion's point, Coach Jones casually stood up, looking completely unconcerned, like this was just another Tuesday. It was no big deal at all. Suddenly, Violet felt embarrassed for freaking out. Coach Jones' voice boomed over the commotion. "All right, gentlemen, I think we'll call it a day. Time to head back." Some of the students cheered at the idea of skipping more training, but nobody moved. Everyone was glued to the fight. "I don't get it," Violet said, frowning. "Do they just, wake up and start brawling like stray dogs? Or is there a reason Griffin is doing this?" Dion looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "You haven't figured it out yet?" "Figured out what?" she asked, confused. His expression turned serious, his voice dropping low. "Grant's part of Griffin's pack. Asher beat him up. This is Griffin's payback." "Oh, shoot," Violet breathed, her chest tightening. This fight was because of her. Asher was taking a beating because of her, and she was completely lost about how she felt about it. Asher's glasses must have fallen off during the fight because, in a sudden and horrifying turn of events, Griffin was ferociously punching his own face. Everyone froze, staring in shock and disbelief. It was then that Violet realized Asher had somehow hypnotized him into doing it. But before things could get any crazier, Roman stepped in, putting himself between the two alphas. Even from where she stood, Violet could hear his commanding voice. "Let go of him, Asher! This has got to stop!" Asher's response was anything but calming. He bared his bloody teeth, a crazed grin stretching across his bruised and battered face. Violet felt a sick twist in her gut. She recognized that look. Asher didn't want this to end. He wanted things to escalate. Chaos was his thing. He thrived on it. The dude was straight up insane. Her attention shifted back to Griffin, who was desperately trying to grab his punching hand with his other hand, fighting to stop the self-inflicted beating. The struggle was clear in his eyes, his face twisted with the effort of holding back his own strength. But no matter how hard he tried, the hand kept rising, inching closer and closer to his face again. Asher's power was mind control. He could mess with his opponent's brain, controlling their movements. He was making Griffin hurt himself, manipulating him like a puppet. But Griffin was a cardinal alpha, his will and strength unmatched by most. Violet couldn't help but wonder if he was strong enough to resist Asher's powers. That wasn't the only freaky thing happening. Violet's eyes widened as she saw Griffin's body start to swell, his muscles growing as he got bigger. It shouldn't have been possible, but nothing was impossible with the Cardinal Alphas. She wasn't the only one who noticed. Beside her, Dion sucked in a sharp breath. "Dang, this is bad." Violet's heart pounded. "What's happening?" Dion's voice was serious. "Griffin's main power is super strength, but it also lets him go berserk. When that happens, he's barely in control. It's not safe anymore." He glanced around nervously. "We gotta get out of here." Violet had no clue what berserk meant, but something told her she didn't want to stick around to find out. Dion wasn't the only one having that thought. Coach Jones, who had been so calm a minute ago, now looked totally panicked. He started yelling at the students, his voice booming with urgency. "Get out of here! Get inside! Now!" The students must have gotten the message because everyone started running like crazy, werewolves included. Only a few hung back, keeping what they thought was a safe distance. None of the regular kids stayed behind, not when their lives were on the line. Violet stopped dead when a ferocious roar ripped through the air, shaking the ground beneath her feet. A shiver ran down her spine as birds flew out of the trees, scared by the obvious danger. Violet turned, and the sight in front of her made her gasp. She saw Griffin, or what was left of him. Griffin Hale was now a monstrous, towering figure, over 7 feet tall. Violet could only stare as her eyes swept over the impossibly huge muscles bulging across his body. His massive arms and legs looked like they could crush anything or anyone in their path, and the only thought in her mind was how easily he could rip her in half. His shirt hadn't survived the transformation, hanging in shreds, while his pants barely clung to him. Whatever beast Griffin had become radiated pure chaos and destruction, yet Violet couldn't stop a brief flicker of awe. Who had created such a monster? That awe lasted only seconds. Griffin let out another deafening roar, like rolling thunder, and then he charged. His target was clear. Roman and Asher, who stood frozen, like deer caught in headlights. Violet wanted to yell a warning, to tell Asher to run, but Griffin was too fast. He charged like a raging bull, unstoppable and furious, yet Asher stood his ground, that crazy glint in his eyes, like he had a plan to stop Griffin, despite being totally outmatched. Roman stepped in front of Asher, ready to fight, but his brain didn't last long. One powerful punch from Griffin sent Roman flying through the air so far that Violet was sure he was dead. But to her shock, Roman changed mid-air. What landed on the ground in its feet wasn't a man. It was a massive, impossibly green yeti, almost as big as Griffin. The creature let out a ferocious roar of its own, a defiant signal that it was still alive. Violet was frozen, totally speechless. What in the world was she seeing? This wasn't a school. It was a crazy circus. Roman turning into a yeti had distracted the monster for a second. Griffin turned back to Asher, who was now unguarded. He raised his hand, but it stopped midway, shaking. Asher had clearly hypnotized him again, using his power to take back control. For a second, it looked like Asher had won. But then, shocking everyone, Griffin fought off the hypnosis and punched Asher right in the face, sending him flying. Great, idiot, Violet thought. The yeti roared again from across the field, grabbing Griffin's attention. They stared each other down, and Violet knew instantly this was going to be a major fight. Judging by the whispers and stares, everyone else knew it too. Forget this, Violet. We gotta go now. Dion's voice snapped her out of her trance. He grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. Violet didn't need to be told twice. She ran, her heart pounding. She wasn't sticking around to get caught in the crossfire. Just before she ducked inside, she saw Asher lift his head from where he'd landed on the ground. At least the wasn't dead.
Hey, amazing viewers! It's Violet here. Thanks for sticking with us. By the time of the release of this video, only 9% of our viewers have joined the party by subscribing, and 91% of you might miss out on our next mind-blowing video. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join the exclusive club.